Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It's a blessing to have you here in this beautiful Sunday morning. God has given us today another day of air conditioning. Today's March 26th. As you know, Becerra de Meneses is an association, it's a non-profit organization. We function strictly on volunteers and donations. And our mission is to study spiritism and promote the practice of spiritual and material charity. I like to stretch out the word donations. Um, if you can, whatever you can help us with, we really need it. I have permission to say that our monthly payment here for the place is $5,000, so that you have an idea how much it is. Thank you. Um, we are broadcasting live on YouTube, so please cells off. And if you wanna, anybody listening, well, if they're listening, they already know that we are at www.youtube.com/Becerra Miami. And today, as usual, we're going to be talking about from the book Our Daily Bread by Francisco Candido Javier, and it was dictated by the Spirit of Emmanuel. We'll be talking about chapter 32, corpses. For wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. This was in Matthew chapter 24, verses 28. In presenting the images of corpses and of vultures, Jesus was making reference to the necessity of the penitent individuals that require the resources in order to be able to struggle for the elimination of the shadows in which they are immersed. The putrid bodies in the field attract vultures that devour them. That presentation of such great significance symbolizes one of the strongest calls from our Lord, invoking the followers of the gospel toward the movement of sanctifying work. In various circles of revived Christianity, many disenchanted followers have searched, complaining about the actions from prosecutors, obsessors, and executioners, visible and invisible. Some students affirm that they feel tied to these influences and confess being incapable of following the designs of Jesus. Much thought should be given prior to making assertions of this sort that in reality it only signals accusations at their authors. It is imperative to remember always that the impious birds will gather around abandoned carcasses. The vultures will seek out other regions when the field in which they were congregating is cleansed. The individual who invariably affirms unhappiness creates the impression that he breathes inside of a tomb. However, when he makes an effort to renovate his own path, those dark birds of sadness will draw themselves farther away. Fight against the cadavers of any shade that may wrap themselves in your inner world. Let the divine sun of spirituality penetrate within you. As long as you remain in a coffin for deadly ideas, you shall be closely pursued by the vultures of destruction. For reflection about today's reading, in today's reading, Emmanuel explains the need for some to seek help in order to be able to struggle to eliminate the shadows in which they find themselves. He tells us how some individuals affirm that they feel tied to these dark influences and confess being incapable of following Jesus' designs. Emmanuel reminds us that it is imperative to remember that vultures will always gather around abandoned carcasses, and how these unholy birds will fly to other regions when the field in which they congregate has been cleaned. Are we making an effort to renovate our path and following Jesus' plan? so that the dark shadows that surround our inner world be replaced by the divine sun. And to begin today's gospel, I will ask you please to close your eyes, take a deep breath, relax, put behind all those thoughts and issues that we had during the week, and elevate your thoughts to the Almighty. And let's give Him thanks. Let's give Him thank you, Lord. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Here again, we are exercising our free will together, feeling happy to be here in this beautiful Sunday, humble and ready to listen to your gospel with all these brothers and sisters that have honored us with their presence today. And for all those that are also watching us through YouTube, thank you for this beautiful doctrine, for this center and its member and its mentor, Becerra de Meneses. As always, dear Heavenly Father, we like to ask you for world peace and to pour out your mercy upon those in need, the hungry, the suffering, the homeless, but above all, dear Lord, upon those children that don't have a roof over their heads or a piece of bread to put in their mouth. Have mercy, dear Lord. Finally, Almighty, we make a special prayer for our brother Luis Lima, that he's going to bring our gospel today, and we pray that you put the right words in his lips, and that you open our hearts and our ears so that we can learn from this beautiful gospel that he's about to say. Thank you, dear Lord. We ask you for this in the name of your Son, Jesus. So be it. Luis Lima is going to be talking about enemies in general. Thank you, Luis.
Good morning. It's not nice to hear about enemies, right? But it's needed. What we're going to do is we're going to base our talk on the chapter Love Your Enemies with something that I call the enemies. So we're going to try to find out what they are and how to deal with them. We're going to start in Alabama, 1957, when Martin Luther King delivered one of the great, maybe one of the greatest ever speeches. It's called Love Your Enemies. It's a very long speech. I'm going to read the closing statement on that speech to you. I'm going to just read it to you. Now, there is a final reason I think that Jesus says, love your enemies. It is this, that love has within it a redemptive power. And there is a power that eventually transforms individuals. That's why Jesus says, love your enemies. Because if you hate your enemies, you have no way to redeem and to transform your enemies. But if you love your enemies, you will discover that at the very root of love is the power of redemption. You just keep loving people and keep loving them, even though they are mistreating you. Here's the person who's a neighbor, and this person is doing something wrong and all of that. Just keep being friendly to that person. Keep loving them. Don't do anything to embarrass them. Just keep loving them, and they can't stand it for too long. Oh, they react in many ways in the beginning. They react with bitterness because they're mad and because you love them like that. They react with guilty feelings, and sometimes they'll hate you a little bit more at the transition period, but just keep loving them. And by the power of your love, they will break down under the load. That's love, you see. It's redemptive. And this is why Jesus says love. There's something about love that builds up and is creative. There's something about hate that tears down and is destructive. So love your enemies. That's the closing statement. And where does it come from? It comes from 2,000 years before him. It comes from Jesus. It's obviously inspired when Jesus tells us, love your enemies, which is something to this day we still have a very hard time making something out of it. So that's what we want to bring it over to you. Let's go through this love your enemies thing that Jesus tells us. What really is deep down, what does it really mean? So love your enemies, 3 words, okay? We're going to exclude because it's a very simple word. So that comes down to love. What are they? So do we know how to love? That's the first thing. No, not really, because we love in a very empowering way. We love something for ourselves, towards ourselves. I love because I need to feel the power of love, but it's not the power of love. It's the power towards me. You see, it has a return on investment kind of idea behind it. I'm looking for something fulfilling my own interests. That's how we love. That's now not how we should love. We should love the other way around, as a surrender. It's a tool for surrendering and being with God. And you see, the problem here is we don't love. We love for ourselves, not for others. Here's a simple example. Let's say, for example, that I'm in love with somebody, but that somebody is much more in love with me. Let's just say that. Let's just picture that, okay? So I like the person, but she desperately loves me, madly in love with me. And then when would we expect? Then I would go to her and say, listen, this is the deal here. I like you, you're okay, and so, but I see you love me madly. So because of that, I'm going to marry you. 2017, what's the likeliness of something like that happening? 0. That would be this. Love because of them, not because of me. We don't do this. We do the other way around. Listen, I love you so bad, so madly. You're going to stop what you're doing. Don't go this, don't stop your school, and give me all the attention that I need. So I'm bringing everything to me. I became the center of the universe. So I'm on the top line. I'm not in the bottom line. So that's the first thing. When he says, love your enemies, we're not talking the same language. So he says A, and I'm starting to understand B from the get-go. In those days, the word love had 4 different meanings. Even here today, for example, I can say, oh, I love this remote, which is totally different than I love somebody, which is totally different than, oh, I love that food. The word is the same, but the meaning is completely different. There were 4 meanings in those days for the word love. One is the romantic, erotic love. The second is the fraternity, brothers and sisters, blood, brothers and sisters, okay? The third is what we call the estranger, which is an extended family. It's affection within family. But in here, it's not family, it's not blood family. Sometimes you have a person that's not on the bloodline, but he lives with them. It's an adopted son. It's somebody that became so close that they became, quote, family. That's estranger, okay? And then there's agape. Agape is what he was saying. So every time he mentions the word love, and I'm in one of the 3 other definitions, I'm off the charts. I'm not going to pick up what he's saying. I'm going to dispute. I'm going to say, listen, you're talking this. I'm not understanding. And that's what happens to most of us. So going back to agape, this non-imprisoning love, because all the other 3, I'm attached to something else. On this, I'm not supposed to be in prison and attached to anything else. It's not in prison, it's liberating. There's no return expected. It's not an investment that, oh, I'm going to love that person because she's going to love me back. She's going to give me this and that. It isn't like this. It's a one-way street. It doesn't matter what comes back, if it comes back. So that's what he was saying. So we go by expectation. We love by expectation. The same way our happiness is based on a reason. If somebody's happy, I'm so happy today. Well, why are you happy today? That's an absurd question, right? It shouldn't be that. So we go through this trying to make something out of love, and that's not what he's saying. He's talking about unconditional love, and what is unconditional love? It's exactly this. It's God's love in man's heart. Because God loves us unconditionally. It doesn't have any conditions attached, no strings attached, nothing like this. And do we know unconditional love? Because if I know, that's a start. If I don't know, that's bad. Do we know unconditional love? Well, think about this. Let's say you have a kid and you tell him, don't do this, don't do that, or don't go here, don't go there. And he's on, let's say, 3 years old, okay? Then he takes the fist, goes like this, and comes to hit you. And he's coming, and he's coming, and I hate you. That's what they do because they're just 3-year-old kids. What do? You close your fist and you do the same, I hate you too? No. You stop the world, you take him over, and you give everything you have for maybe, let's say, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, everything. Within those 5 minutes, there's no bad neighbor, no bad country, no money issues, no traffic, nothing. Everything stopped. You put yourself at a completely different level. You raised above, way above. And within those 3 minutes, 5 minutes that you're holding them, the world is different. That is 3 minutes of unconditional love. But we don't do this continuously. We don't know how to sustain that. So we know unconditional love. We have glimpses of it, but we don't know how to sustain. What he's saying is that little thing that you know, sustain it. But we can't. It's too hard for us yet. That's exactly what he's saying when he says, love your enemies. We can't do that. We can't do that because we would have to sustain. And it's very hard to sustain. So, again, do we know how to love? Not really. You see, the presence of enemies in our lives is the answer. No, I don't know how to love because I have enemies. One leads to the other. How many enemies you have? One. Okay. How many enemies you have? 200. Oh. You see, that's us answering our own question. Do we know how to love? No. Do I have enemies? Yes. I don't know how to love, period. Based on what he's saying. So the challenge is, try to see how much I'm far away from doing this. And here's a very interesting phrase. Look at this. Love is measured by the sacrifice, not by the enjoyment. It's very powerful. It's very strong. That's something you take to the pillow at night and you think about it the whole night. It's very strong. It's not by enjoyment. By enjoyment means, oh, I'm loving. Yeah, it's great. That's return on investment. That's fulfilling my own interest. That's not what he was saying. All right, so that's the word love. Let's move over to the next word, enemies. Then we're going to try to combine and see what happens, right? Okay, so enemies. We got questions, right? Who are they? Where are they? How should I love them? Why should I love them? Well, let's see what we can make out of this thing. So who are they? First question. There are two types in general that we can consider enemies. That's us. That's our consideration. Doesn't mean that it is a final statement, but that's what we go by usually. Physical contact. People that we don't like, that we get into fights all the time. There's physical contact and aggressions, stuff like that. That would be something that we, in our language, in our current status of evolution, we would call an enemy. Now, there's another type of enemy that not necessarily requires physical contact. It might be just proximity, physical proximity, or it might be just something, on the other side of the world. For example, you're in America and you hate everybody in the Middle East. You never knew any of those people. You haven't met any of them yet, but they're enemies for our standards, okay? So that's what we call the antipathy. It's something that's not physical related, but it's just this kind of, these people, these supposedly enemies, they get me out of my comfort zone. And that's bad. So I'm going to tag these people as enemies. It's very complicated because we can't deal with the situation like we would like to. Let's sit down and talk. There is no sit down and talk because it's not something physical. It's not something that we can deal with. And let's go to the conference room, have a meeting, and get something, sign a peace contract. It isn't like this. That's not the physical level. It's one level above, and it becomes complicated. So we need to, that's the bad one, because that's the difficult one. That's the one we have more trouble dealing with. So if you go back in history, for example, how many enemies did Jesus have? Was Judas one of his enemies? Yes or no? What do you think? He wasn't. Judas was not one of his enemies. The Sadducees in the Sanhedrin, they were not his enemies. How about the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin? They were not. You see, all these people considered, the Sadducees and Pharisees considered Jesus the enemy. But Jesus never considered them the enemies, because he was way above. He was unconditional love. So it wouldn't even make sense for him to make a list of enemies. We have a blacklist. All of us. We have a blacklist. It might be long, it might be a few names, but we have a blacklist. All of us. And that's where the problem is. We have a blacklist because of the hostilities that we go through in our lives. It could be a coworker, a family member, a neighbor, somebody in the society. We have a blacklist. And these hostilities is very clear in the book, What is Spiritism? When the spirits tell Allan Kardec that hostilities are imperfections. Of course, we're not perfect. So hostilities will come up at times. And depending on how we deal with them, the enemy is going to be more of an enemy or less of an enemy. It depends on how significant this thing is for me, not them. It doesn't depend on them. Okay? And the reason is why it doesn't depend on them, because we can change our approach. This person could be my worst enemy today, 10 years later, it's my best friend. And we've seen a lot of that in history. So we label people as enemies based on what we see, based on us, based not on them. You see, look at, for example, let's say this person here is my enemy, but it's not your enemy, it's not yours, it's not yours. So he can be the reason. It has to be me. It's centered within me, not him. Because if I ask you, what is the color of the wall? And everybody says blue. Yeah, most likely it's blue, right? It doesn't depend on me. It depends on the wall itself. Not here. It's different. It depends on me. What I make out of that person, that thing, that situation, okay, depends on me. So we judge and we label people because we are showing who we are. Judging people reveals who I am, not who they are. Because they are, at the same time, 7 billion people, because we are 7 billion, judging and labeling in a different way. So our judgment reveals who we are. And who are we? So that's the first question, right? It's becoming more complicated. And here's an image that I like to bring. I always do this, which is the image of an orange. If I give you an orange, I'm going to tell you what's inside. If I ask you what's inside, you're probably going to say, well, orange juice, right? You don't have to open it. You don't have to cut it open to tell me. And it doesn't matter how you get to inside the orange. If you cut it, if you put it under the truck, if you step on it, what comes from inside is always the same. It's always the same. It's that orange juice. It's always the same. And that's who we are. Inside, we are always the same. Now, the situation is going to be less drastic, more drastic. If I cut the orange, it's going to be nice and beautiful. 2 halves, exactly the same. Inside orange juice. If you put it in a truck, it's going to be all splashed. But still, it looks a lot worse if you think of real bad damage. But what comes from inside is still the same thing. So we are tested all the time. We are tested with knives, with trucks, with people stepping on us. But what comes from inside is always the same. It's the orange juice. Okay? So in order to see what comes out of us, let's go through a little analysis here. So I've created an enemy registration form. The enemy registration form is something that I'm gonna take the blame myself, so we don't pass the blame to anybody else. But this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna kind of, quote, scan my life from the time I was a small child until now. And I'm going to list everybody that became my enemy. Okay, so I've created an enemy registration form. So here's the number 1. Joe. In 1970, he shows up in the school parking lot with the greatest car ever. Oh no, that hit me. That hit me. And he became my enemy. He's been approved as my enemy. And this is 1970. We are in 2017, and I still remember that. Right? We are 2017, and I still remember that. Okay, here's another one. Mary. In 1983, she worked with me, and she was my boss, and she fired me. Oh no, big enemy. It's been approved. This is in 1983, and I'm carrying that over. And I remember that with the feelings and emotions of the day that I was fired. It's not something I was just mentioning, I got fired. No, I feel the same thing. James, 1975. He was my neighbor. He stole my girlfriend. Oh no, this is gonna go straight into the list. This guy makes to the list easily. And I still remember that day. I still remember him. You see, we're still in 1975, and I only gave you 3 things. And they're kind of piling up here. Here's another one. 1998, in the office that I used to work, Susie gets the promotion that I was supposedly to get. And she got it. Oh no, blacklist. She's in my blacklist. And I still remember that to this day. You see, I'm building up a blacklist here. Here's another one. Mario. I don't know exactly why, but I just don't get along with him. I can't get close to this guy. I feel like horrible, and I have to get away from him. Here's what happened. In a past life, obviously, at the conscious level, I can't remember, but he shot me in a farm. So he's my enemy. I cannot even tell you why. I just don't feel good when Mario comes close to me. I feel the need to get away from him. So he's been approved as my enemy, because where he goes, I don't go. If he's there, I'm going to go here. If he walks into the same party that I am, I might just leave the party. So I can't tell you why, but he's been approved as my enemy. Here's another one, Nick. 5 to the current day. So that's a long period. He works in the main office where I am, and he needs to type things for me at times, and he's very slow, and I can't stand it. And I pace, and I go like, obviously I'm not very tolerant. So he's been approved as my enemy. Every time I have to go to Nick to tell him, type this, I go like, oh my God. You see, here's another one. Mr. Fox, from the year 2000 to the present day, he is the cashier at the supermarket. But he's very slow. So when I walk into the supermarket, the first thing I look is, where is he? Because I'm not going to go to that cashier. And I'm always worried about this. Oh, it's time to pay. Where is he? Oh, he's there. I'm going to go this way. Because he's been kind of my enemy. If I avoid him at all costs, he's my enemy. He's been approved as my enemy. By who? By myself. So here's the exact same list. I gave you the forms. So here's a compilation of the form. This is exactly the same thing, the same people, and the same dates, and the same things. Now, think about the first guy, for example. He bought the car. He shows up in the parking lot, and I feel like, what's happening here? There's something underlying. It's not the car. Because if he brought the latest laptop, I would be feeling the same thing, the same way. It's not the physical object, the physical device, the physical whatever it is. There's something underlying, and the same applies to all of them. So if we're going to look at the underlying feelings, so Joe, what's the problem? Well, he has some sort of car that I like to have myself, but I can't. It's called envy. And so it goes, like, for example, Mario shot me in the death. I feel the need for that revenge. I just don't know what it is. I don't deal well with this because it's on a past life, so it's not really at the conscious level. But it's there. And you look at, let's say, Mr. Fox, this low cashier, intolerance. That's what's in there. It's not him. It's not the cashier. It's not the supermarket. It's not the line. It's just me. I'm not tolerant enough for the situation. It's the situation. It's not him as a physical body, as a person. Okay, so we could rate this. We could put a rank in this. Who is the worst enemy? So let's say, for example, that Joe, the first guy here, shows up on my list, let's say 10 times. He brought the car and he did this and he did that. So he shows up on my list 10 times. He would be my number one enemy. I can rank by the number of times they show up on my list. So let's say Mary would show up 3 times on my list. And that's how I build my ranking. So let's just say Joe is my worst enemy, and then Mary, and then Susie, and so and so and so. Because that's what we do. Why do you like him? Oh, because he did this, and you put a whole list. You pull out from the blacklist. It's in there. It's in the database. It's in the database. So you pull out, oh, he did this and this and this. Sometimes we are able to tell the time and the day and the situation. Oh, there was a chair here and this, and he did that, because it's so encrusted in our feelings, right? We do that. So that's our blacklist. Now, if we can rank the blacklist, if there is one of these people that has all these underlying feelings at the same time, let's say a guy that did so bad that he's in my list, let's say 3,000 times, this would be the worst enemy. So you will be somebody that whatever you consider on the underlying column, all of them apply to this guy. He's all of that. That would be ranked number 1 enemy. Do we have somebody like this in our lives? If you read the gospel, you get hit a lot of times by things that we don't do right. If you read the entire gospel, you're going to get hit 3,000 times, 5,000 times. If you read the gospel and Emmanuel, then 10,000 times. If you read gospel, Emmanuel, and Joanna de Angelis and Andrea Luis, probably 50,000 times. So yes, we have somebody where in our consciousness telling us, applying for the form, every single paragraph, I fill out the enemy registration form. Who is that person? It's the one who brought us all of that. His name is Jesus. And then you look like there's something wrong. My worst enemy is Jesus? What? It doesn't make sense, does it? It doesn't make sense looking at this, but there's a mistake on this table. You see, the enemy is not on the far left column. The enemy is on the far right column. The enemy is the intolerance, is the hatred. That's what takes me down. It's not Joe that takes me down. It's not Mary that takes me down. It's the intolerance, the revenge, the hatred. Those guys on the left column, they're helpers. They're helping bring up situations that I can include myself and see myself. Oh, when Joe did that, oh my God, what an envy, what a horrible, awful thing. Let me try to get away from it. These people on the left side, they are the helpers. The biggest of all being Jesus, not him being the biggest enemy, but the biggest helper by far. So when you look at this, things change a little bit, because now we're going to look into who are the enemies again. They don't have persons' names. They are these things here on the right side. So when I look at the list, right, that list, let's try to make something out of that list. So here I am, Almighty, right? That's what I think I am, right? And here are all my supposedly enemies. And here's the first question. What is the direction of these feelings? From them to me or from me to them? It's from me to them. So if it's that way, from me to them, where does it start? Where is the source? The source is here. So I am the source of all my enemies. Plain simple like that. I am the source of all my enemies because I create them and I sustain. You see, sustain. Instead of sustaining love, I sustain the blacklist. That's what we do at the level that we are. So the enemies are within. The enemies are not Joe, Mary. They don't have people's names. They have one name. It's called me. That's the name. And these things will propagate and eat us inside. They will take us down. You know, sometimes you are at a hatred level so bad that you shut down. You lose your reason. You lose your lucidity. That's it. You're gone. You're gone for the time that you sustain. Every time I sustain one of these things, I'm shutting myself down. That's part of the problem. Now, look at this man, Saul of Tarsus, that became Paul of Tarsus. What did he do? He got out of the black box. He looked at the black list and said, that's it. From now on, I'm going to do something different. From now on, I'm going to do something different. After that day, how many enemies did he have? None. Now, before that day, before the conversion, Peter was an enemy. Jesus was an enemy. Stephen was an enemy. After the conversion, what happened to these people? Nothing. They're still Peter. They're still Andrew. They're still the same people he wanted to kill. What changed? He changed. Within, not outside. It wasn't them. Peter is still Peter. Andrew is still Andrew. Bart is still Bart. As exactly as they were, with the same physical appearance, with the same clothing, with the same profession, they did not change. He changed. That's a change within. That's what we need to do ourselves. Here's another example. The book, No Solar. Actually, in the movie, it's much more interesting because you see something on the screen, the way the screen was built. But André Luiz he tries to go back to the house where he used to live to see how his wife/widow, or both, because I don't know how to define that anymore. So he goes back to see how she was doing. She's already married to somebody else, has a new husband. And the interesting thing is he gets mad. He gets really mad. And in the video, the scenario behind it, the screen behind it changes from something very nice and flowers and so to something all dark, and that's interesting. And then he's gonna walk out. He gets inflated with hatred, so he turns around to walk out, and then he sees that he goes like, no, wrong move. Let me go back and go there and face it. That's what it does, and everything turns back into flowers. And so, you see, it wasn't anything else other than himself changing. The change will not. You see, if that person that I absolutely hate changes, I'm still hating the same way. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what they do, what they are doing. So here's the next question. Why should I love these enemies then? So let's consider these enemies, right? The people that we call enemies. So we already know that they are not. But let's consider that we see them as people. Why should I love them? There's a few reasons. Here's one of them. Because I need to practice love. They are helpers. Remember that. They are helpers. They're giving me the opportunity to practice that, to bring the best out of me, and let's put this in practice. It's an option that I have. I can choose not to use that option, but I do have it. It's an opportunity for growth where I can set sail towards evolution. And if I want to go this way, I need to change within. I need to change within. The sea is not going to change. I have to change within. And here's another thing, the other face. That's the unconditional love. Remember in the beginning, your 3-year-old comes with the fist like that. What's the other face of hatred? It's love. What did you do? He brought hatred. You give him all the love possible. That's unconditional love. That's the other face. You bring hate, I'm going to show you the other face of it. You bring intolerance, I'm going to show you tolerance. You bring impatience, I'm going to show you patience. That's the other hand. That's the other face. So we are given the opportunity to do this almost every day in our lives. You bring hatred, okay, calm down. I'm going to turn this into something else. Here's another one. These helpers, they're here to show us where we have not mastered yet. I have not mastered, let's say, intolerance or tolerance. I'm very intolerant. So they are showing me that I have not mastered that thing or any of these feelings. Okay? Here's another one. Self-esteem. We can boost somebody else's self-esteem by loving them. So we can do things. By loving my enemies, I'm doing something not only for me, but for them too. People who have self-esteem need a lot of love. And we can provide that if we choose to. It's a choice. If we choose to, we can provide that. So it has I can have an impact on other people as well. And here's the best of all, I can love them to make them lovable. Because their heart could be shut completely. That's it. Cold heart. It's a stone, right? That's what Martin Luther King is saying. Keep loving them. At one point, they're going to dismantle. I could be the one dismantling them, and then they become lovable after that day. They'll have a much better life. They'll have a much better relation to the world in general. And I can be the one doing this. Okay, now, this is why I should love them, but how? Okay, I know why, but how can I do this? So here's one of the greatest phrases ever. Albert Einstein. No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. Because at this level of consciousness, I know how to create problems. For me to create solutions, I have to be here. So I have to raise above. How do I raise above? Within. 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 I go within here. Oh, okay, I see a problem now because now I'm outside the box. I raised one level. Oh, I see the problem. Let's hands-on and fix it. So this is one of the greatest phrases. Number two, how I should love them. How? With good feelings towards them. All those enemy feelings that we had, if I sustain them, I'm not making anything out of it. I'm making it worse for myself. So in order to sustain them, I have to think, I have to carry good feelings. Here's another one, self-evaluation. Like St. Augustine, at the end of the day, go through the list. That's this. What am I doing that's not working? What am I doing that's not, I have this guilt of things not getting done. Guilt is only good if it generates action. If you don't do any action with guilt, you're going to be guilt forever. So it has to generate some action. I have to extract something out of it. Here's another one, Emmanuel. Law of cause and effect. Those who hurt others, these are his words. Those who hurt others definitely don't know what they are doing, since they ignore responsibilities that it carries within the law of cause and effect. So I can keep thinking that that person is my enemy. That's the cause. Wait for the effect. It's going to come. It's going to come. All right, so here's some reflections. First of all, the meaning of the enemies in our lives. What is the meaning of the enemies in our lives? They're helpers. They're creating situations. How do I see these enemies? Okay, that person, every time he comes in, oh my God, okay, what's the situation? What am I missing here? What's underlying? So they are here to reveal the underlying problems and help us master better. They are our friends because they are the ones who help. Friends help. They're friends. It's hard for us to face them as friends at the physical level, but that's what they are. They are telling me, you're not good here. That, like a teacher, right? You go for a test and you get a question that it's wrong. He's going to say, listen, you got this wrong because you answered this way, but you should have answered this way. All right, so I learned that. So these are teachers. These are people who are teachers. In the latest translation of the book No Solar, they use a new word in the latest translation, which is the original word in Portuguese. It's called umbral, U-M-B-R-A-L. Up to the latest translation, before that, they were using dark zones, which can be a million different things because of spiritualism and other things. So they decided once and for all to keep the original word and just explain on a footnote what it means. Umbral is a place that we go after death so we can ourselves, right? Within, that's again, within. So you see, we need to de-umbralize ourselves. It looks like we're always there all the time because we carry enemies. You don't carry enemies at higher levels of spiritual evolution. Enemies are for lower levels. If we carry enemies all around, all over the place, if we have a bag of enemies, if we have a blacklist, we are umbralized. Okay? Here's another idea. Locating the enemy. Look at this proverb. When there is no enemy within, the enemies outside cannot hurt you. That's wise. It's very wise. Because it's all within. They can't hurt me because they're just another person going through the same things, same processes that I'm going or should be going. They won't hurt me. I can't feel the possibility of being hurt if I have no enemies within. You see, that person is my enemy. Let's say that I'm going to consider that person my enemy because, let's say Joe, the guy with the car in the parking lot. So he's my enemy because of envy, basically. Why do I say that? Because envy is inside. If envy is not inside, I can't relate to that. You see, there's a group of people in the Indonesian islands. They have their own language, their own dialects. They do not have a word for getting lost. They're never lost. Wherever they go, they will look around. Oh, there's nobody here. But they don't feel they are lost because they consider they're always with God. There's not a word for that. So they can't relate to being lost. This is something they don't recognize. The day that I don't recognize envy because it's not within anymore, you can buy whatever you want. You can show me right on my face. It's not going to make any difference. I relate to that envy because it's within. I relate to intolerance because it's within. It's relatable. Okay? How can I value my enemies? I have to seek the value of my enemies in my life. So that boss, horrible boss, and okay, there's a value to this. What do I make out of this? He's very tough. He does this. He does that. He tells me to do this. He's authoritarian. There's a meaning for this. Where did I not master yet? What can I not handle properly yet? So this is something, this is internal work. It's not going to be published on somebody's Facebook and you pick up. No. It's internal work. You have to go through the process. All of us, not you, me too, of course. So loving your enemies becomes loving yourself, because where are the enemies? So there's a logic behind this thing, and here's the logic. First of all, identify the enemies. What are the enemies? Joe, Mary, no. Envy, intolerance, hatred, selfishness. Okay, I have identified the enemies. Once I get that in my hands, I'm working on my blacklist, right? So once I put that here and I have it on my hands, I go to the next level. Where are these guys located? Are they in Japan? Are they in California? Are they down in Miami downtown? No, they are within. They are within. Okay, I've located these people. They are within. Next thing, what do I do with that? When the enemy comes down, remember the kid? You give the other face. Okay, so from now on, I'm going to give the other face. So you come to me, all aggressive and all off the charts, and you're going to have a comment saying, what's happening to you? Calm down. You need help? You see, he wants to attack me. I'm going to offer help. He wants to kill me. We're going to offer life. That's the other face that Jesus says. Okay, so once I have taken the initiative of doing this, we go to the next phase, which is love what I have, and it's good. Yeah, I could respond with hatred as well, but I did not make that choice. My answer came out of love. So I'm going to start loving my answers. I'm going to start loving every time I bring love. I bring friendship. I bring tolerance. I'm going to start loving this. And collectively, I start loving myself. Because, oh yeah, I can bring out good things. Yes, I can. I've been doing them here and there in the beginning, more and more as time goes by. Yeah, I can bring the good out of me to a point where, wow, I'm really good, man. I love myself. Then we go to the next level. Now I can love everyone. You see, I can only do that once I start here, once this phase is completed. Because I'm only going to use the elements that make return on investment attractable for me. And here, that stops when I get to that level. So now I love everyone. And once I love everyone, now I have what? No enemies left. So there's a logic to this thing. It's complicated. It's complex. It's not easy. But there's a logic to everything in this world. We learned that on question number 1 of the Spirit's book. What is God? Right? And once we get to all of this, then we understand what Jesus meant by love your enemies, or even better, enemies. Enemies are not people's names. They don't have physical location. They don't have addresses. Because if you consider at the very basic level, at the most material level, love your enemies. Imagine Jesus saying to these people, to, fishermen and so, those rude people, love your enemies. These people would think, well, here's my enemy. Let me find out where he lives. I'm going to go knock on his door and just give him a hug. Oh, I love you. That's impossible for those people. It's not going to happen, because that's not what he meant. He meant all of these things that are within. He never meant go knock on the door and give him a hug. That's not what it is. Thank you very much, and have all a great day. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to do our final prayer. Thanking Jesus for the opportunity to be here, all of us together, learning a little bit more, learning about his ideas, his teachings, learning how to practice them. Let's thank the mentors of the center for preparing the environment for all of us to be here in peace today. Dear Master Jesus, that your love can reach those in prison in their self. It can reach those in hospitals, sometimes don't know why they're in such situations. They are still attached to a very material life, and they revolt. That your love and your energy can be part of their life, that they can start, such as we do as well, all of us trying to sustain this love, this unconditional love, sustain friendship, sustain all the good things in life. So our enemies, little by little, will disappear. Master Jesus, thank you so much once again for this day and the opportunity to be here together. Thank you. So be it.